Today we're going to talk about how to retain more of what you read. These tips are unconventional and they're hard won from the battle, the lifelong battle I've been waging. They're tips from the trenches, tips that I don't see many people recommending, if any. So I'd like to give them to you, and a bit about my history. I went to Oxford for about 3 years. I studied English language and literature. I read freaking everything, and I realised that I wasn't actually reading for retention. It's only once I graduated and I started doing my own self-education, and to be honest, really the last few years, that I started to become a powerhouse of retention, really retaining what I read and being able to use it practically, making the poetic practical, getting life advice from these great old wise books, treating fiction like non-fiction, and befriending people like Thoreau, Shakespeare, Hemingway. Before we go any further, I'd like to say that this video is sponsored and brought to you by Skillshare, particularly two of my own courses. There is the Oxbridge Studying Masterclass, How to Study Like an A-grade Student. If you're interested in the content of this video, if you're interested in learning to retain what you read, you'll love that class. And also how to hack your academic performance through diet and exercise. I've brought on an accredited physiotherapist for that one. It's going to be a really good one. There's a link in the description below. It's completely free. You get 2 months free of Skillshare. That means you can access all the classes, including mine. So please take advantage of it. Be my guest. I made it for people like you. And now let's get into the tips. I've always been the type of reader that has about 20 books on rotation. I'm not good at one at a time. I get book ADHD. I've got to have constant novelty. I've got to bring books into conversation with each other, and I'll be buying books even when I haven't finished a book. What I realised after years of this type of reading was that I would steam through all these books, but I wouldn't remember anything that I read really. And I thought, that's a little bit unfair, because an artist has poured thousands of hours of craft. They've put their soul into this book, and they've given you something that could really positively affect your life, could bring you a lot of joy, could change the way you see the world, and you don't remember any of it? Seems a bit wrong. So I had to, by necessity, if I wanted to continue being a reader, and if I wanted to evolve as a reader and become a better, deeper reader, I had to get these mindset shifts. And here they are. Okay, my first tip, and this is a really unconventional one, and I know a lot of people aren't going to like it, but it's to record yourself doing book reviews and reiterating and digesting, explaining, summarising, expounding upon, analysing what you've read. It's only when I started doing really in-depth, studied, involved book reviews in the form of podcasts and videos that I developed a photographic memory for what I've read. My first podcast episode was on Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. After that, I went on to talk about some of my favourite books like Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke, The Poetry of Rumi, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, and recently Chekhov, Blake, Shakespeare, Maupassant, Guy de Maupassant. Every book or every story, every writer that I've discussed in a podcast or video capacity, it is like I have downloaded that information permanently into my brain. And there's a few reasons for that. One, when you're actually reading the book the first time, you're getting your first read over. But because you've told yourself you're going to review it and you're going to put it in a public place for other people to perhaps comment upon, something that you want to be proud of, you're also kind of becoming a bit of an artist yourself because you're fashioning something. There is an art to being a critic. Now, because you're reading with the aim to then review it and then teach people about it, talk about it at length, you are instantly more active and more astute, and you start doing things that active readers do, namely marginalia, keeping a commonplace book, writing out notes, rereading pages, connecting things, creating a table of contents, that sort of thing, really referencing other books. You start thinking really attentively. And if you want to learn more about how to do this, check out my video on how to annotate books for effective note-taking. It's a good one. And because you're reading actively, more goes in, and you'll be making notes and you'll be thinking about, well, what are the interesting points that I want to talk about in a podcast or in a video capacity? And then it comes time to actually do it. So when you're then doing the podcast and the review and the video, you're going over your notes. So you get another review and a refresher. And then you're speaking it. You get another review and a refresher. And it's more emphatic because you speaking about it instantly crystallizes it and makes it more of a personal and evocative and important and poignant memory that's going to stick around. And then if you want to take it to the absolute next level, play it back. I would say ideally, if you're going for a run or doing some exercise, and this is builds upon some tips that I recommend in the Skillshare course that I mentioned, how to hack your academic performance. Listen to your own voice. Okay, people aren't going to like this because nobody likes listening to themselves. Nobody likes watching themselves back. But if you can do it and get over the little bit of cringe factor, which is just normal at the beginning, once you get over that, you're listening to you rehash the information, and then it's going in again. And then you start thinking about, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that, or, oh, is that true? And then you start to, and then it just sears, your own words sear into your brain. My recommendation is, if you want to take this really seriously, is to go high stakes. Get yourself a decent website, and that might mean actually paying for hosting, that might mean paying for a nice theme, and type up your book reviews and make them public, and maybe email them to your friends or send them to people who you don't even know, that maybe you follow them online and you know that they like X writer, well, you've just read a book by them, so you're going to send them a summary. And now that influences how you're going to write the review, because you're writing for an audience. Or you could check out some podcast hosting. I recommend Libsyn, and then get yourself Audacity, a free software. Get yourself a nice mic. I recommend the Yeti in the links below. And then sit down, get some headphones on, and record yourself talking about it. And then upload it. And then tell people about it. Tell your friends and family to listen to it. And you'll be a bit embarrassed, and it will be it'd be hard to get over that, but you'll be suddenly creating something for an audience. So you have to be attentive, and you have to retain what you read by necessity. It's not even by an aim. It's not like your aim is, I'm going to retain what I read. You just will as a side effect, a byproduct of what you're doing. Or you could do what I'm doing right now and just switch the camera on and start talking and then upload it to YouTube. That's good too. My next tip is really controversial, but I really love this one as well, and that is to read and listen simultaneously. There are a lot of studies, I can send them to you if you're interested, that show the benefits of having auditory and also sub-vocalizing at the same time. So hearing it and reading it at the same time. You slow down by necessity, but you can the picture is more evocative. It's more of an experience. You've got someone voicing it. And with a lot of books, especially difficult ones, the meaning is unclear until you hear it read aloud. And this is the same for Ulysses by James Joyce. It's the same, in my opinion, about one of my favourite books, which is Lincoln and the Bardo by George Saunders. I tried to read that book without audiobook narration. And for 50 pages, I didn't know what was going on. Then I got the audiobook, which is one of the best audiobooks of all time, with like 300 different voice actors. And I instantly knew what was going on. It came alive in my mind. This is probably why Amazon has that Whisper Sync feature. So basically, if you're reading on Kindle, they give you a discount for the audiobook version as well, and you can sync it up. So wherever you get in the Kindle will update your audiobook, but you can do it at the same time. It's no problem. If you want to check out Audible, by the way, if you're a book lover and you haven't already checked out Audible, check out the link below and you'll get a free trial and a free credit. It's brilliant. It's one of my favorite things. So you kind of slow down, because obviously you can read faster than you can listen to something. But the point of reading shouldn't be like skim reading. I don't like this idea of skim reading or speed reading. I think it's bullshit, and I think it has no place when it comes to literature. Obviously, if you're reading a textbook, speed reading or skim reading is very important, because you want to pick out the integral information and you want to discard everything that's not central to what you're writing about or researching. But when it comes to literature, slowing down is a huge benefit. It makes the story come alive, it improves your active vocabulary and your passive vocabulary, and it just makes the whole thing more enjoyable, and it will stick around in your mind. My next tip is to reduce the amount of books that you're reading. Everybody, brags about how many books they're reading, and okay, I do it as well, because I often brag and go, oh, I used to read 300 books a year. That's bullshit. I would much rather read 12 books a year, carefully selected, lovingly devoted, paid attention to, than 300 and not really remembered them. This is actually a real problem in what they call the booktube community, because you have people talking about their TBRs and what they read for the month, and they'll say, oh, I read 20 books this month, I read 25, or I'm so depressed I only read 18 books this month. Dude, you did not read those books. Now, when you compare it to people like Thoreau, people like Shakespeare, how many books these people, these great writers, read in their lifetime? You're trying to read more in a month than they read in their lifetime. The difference, though, is Shakespeare would read Holinshed's history, he would read Ovid, he would read the Bible, Thoreau would read a few choice classics like Homer, Aeschylus, Aristophanes, whatever, and that's it. And they'd reread and reread and reread and pay attention to it, and they'd get a lot more out of it. So, hey, you can't read every great book ever written anyway. There's not enough time. If from now to the end of your life, all you did was spend your time speed reading, you still wouldn't read every good, amazing book. And that is a tragedy. But that means you've got to be more selective and think, right, what do I want to read this month? What do I want to read this year? For me, I said I want to do the biggies. So at the moment, I'm reading Anna Karenina. And I thought a bit, foolishly, that I would finish it in a month. And then I'd be on to my next biggie. But it's actually been a few months now and I still haven't finished it. And I'm perfectly okay with that, because I'm living with the novel over the long term. And I'm getting a lot of enjoyment out of living with it long term, because it's a big old book. Tolstoy creates a whole world. He's like God, peopling it with really vivid characters and really interesting ideas. So why would you want to speed read that? So I'm taking my time with it. And because I've picked it carefully, I've said, Anna Karenina is one of those books that you want to really devote to and you want to spend some time with. That hits upon one of my other tips, which is to reread, and I will be rereading it as well. When I get to the end, I'll be going back over, looking at my marginalia, looking at my scribblings, and I'll be rereading my favourite passages, which also feeds in to my next tip, which is to watch courses and lectures around the book. When I'm finished with Anna Karenina, I'm going to go on the great courses. If you want to check it out, there's a free trial link in the description below. It's awesome. It's a Netflix for nerds, a bunch of lectures, and I'll be taking a Russian literature course that talks about Tolstoy. So I'll be learning more about it, or I'll be reading some criticism by Harold Bloom that just reinforces it all in your mind. But anyway, so once I'm done with Anna, then I'm going to move on to Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. And then after that, it's Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, and then War and Peace, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, But if I get to the end of the year and that's all I've read, or the only significant books I've read, I'm going to have to be cool with that. Sure, I've got Chekhov on my shelf. Sure, I've got all the complete works of Shakespeare. Sure, I've got Turgenev, I've got Søren Kierkegaard, I've got Plato, I've got all of Aristotle. Slow down and be selective and be faithful, be monogamous. One book, slowly, lovingly, devote your attention and your soul to it, and you'll get so much more out of it than just speed reading and getting on to the next thing. My next tip is to cross-pollinate your knowledge. What does that mean? That means whatever you're reading, try to bring that into the real world. That might mean talking to people about what you're reading. That might mean getting people to read the same thing. It might mean going to an art gallery or visiting the theatre or doing something new or doing something that the people in your book talk about. Now, I went to the Titian exhibit recently. It was really good, despite the social distancing aspect. And I found that Titian was inspired by Ovid's Metamorphoses. So I immediately started reading Ovid's Metamorphoses, and suddenly I regret not having read them before going to the gallery, because I suddenly understood all the pictures, I understood all the narratives. And then, what did I do? I released a podcast on one of the stories from Ovid's Metamorphoses, which I really enjoyed. It's about Daedalus and Icarus, the boy who flew too close to the sun. And I'm going to do one for pretty much all the myths that interest me. I'm going to deep dive into the psychological significance of the classic myths. So what I did was I went to the gallery and I looked in the real world about what I was reading, or I go to the gallery and it influences my reading. And I like to do this on a weekly basis. Once I've read Les Miserables, you better believe I'm going to go to the theatre and I'm going to watch Les Mis. Then I'm going to watch the movie, and then I'm going to reread it, and then I'm going to take courses about it. Maybe I'll learn a bit of French. Really, it all comes down to more deep reading, active and devoted and deliberate, focused monogamy with one book. Another tip, as I've already hit upon, but it bears repeating, deface your books. Now, it used to be I would get a book and I didn't even want to crack the spine of the book. I definitely wouldn't be dog-earing it. I definitely wouldn't be writing on it. But when I went to Oxford, my favourite tutor, Dr. James Methven, he said you have to get out of that delusion of keeping the book pristine. You don't own a book unless you deface it. You need to make each book yours. Okay, there's some exceptions. I got these gorgeous books from the Everyman collection behind me. They're beautiful. And as I've said before, I wouldn't dream of defacing these books. But hey, if it's a paperback, I will be covering it. I'll be making notes. And I have a journal. I have a separate journal that I keep. I have tabs open. I have little stickers. I have bookmarks. I tear pages out even. I'm crazy with my books. People get unnerved when they see me reading because it's like someone gobbling down food, but the book equivalent. You need to do that because that's part of being an active reader and sucking the marrow out of everything. My last tip is the foundation under which all these tips are based, and that is to dialogue. That basically talk about the book, argue with people about the book, argue with the author, talk out loud, talk in your mind, talk with friends, talk with family, reach out to people, email people, just talk as much as you can with anyone who might show an interest. You don't have to talk about specifically a book with people who haven't read the book, but you can at least try and get the themes of the book or ideas that you've gained from the book into the world and start thinking about them and bringing them into reality and benefiting from them. Because really, reading is not the solitary activity that many think it is. It is a great deal of fun to read by yourself and be very quiet and thoughtful, and it's great. But I think one of the greatest joys about reading is to use it to engage with the world and learn how to love and be more of a robust human. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate if you hit the like button and subscribe, because that tells me to keep making more videos. I'm still in the sort of infancy of doing all this sort of thing right now, so that's really valuable to me. And if you like thinking about retaining what you read and how to improve your recall and memory and stuff like that, then please check out the free video Skillshare course by following the link below. Have a good day and happy reading.